your thought and emotion. So there, one can say that there are two degrees of compassion.
다 진짜게 닝지도 영어래 야 싫고 좋아져 거래. 동네 새로운 버지 통나 닝지 슉 잡고 계속 봐. 동네 새로운 버 마통 다 강자 삼버지 마도 그냥 그 딜레 점 딜레 점 삼바다. 디 삼도디 도스 가도 와. 리미드잖아 그 싫고 좋아져 거야.
However, a successful development and cultivation of compassion really requires the complementary factor of wisdom and insight, because if you lack the faculty of wisdom and insight, then when you are confronted with an object of suffering, you may feel this kind of genuine compassion, kind of spontaneously. But given that your resources are limited, you may simply kind of have the wish, thinking, may he or she be free of that pain or suffering. But slowly that kind of feeling may kind of lead into some kind of helplessness, because immediately you realize, well, I can't do anything. Whereas if you are equipped with the faculty of wisdom and insight, then you have a much greater resources to draw from, so that your compassion, the more you focus on that object of compassion, the greater the intensity of your compassion will be, the greater it will increase.
Today is an shirugi that cavalry thing, any young Injilia, any shirugi, talk, mistake and mavachenta, mavas was all that could do the Ninja to Zane, any got some just down maybe ninjas there, chick. That's a thing only a shiru, mixage by sad of them. In
Buddhist literature, we find discussions of three different types of compassion, or three different levels of compassion. One is the initial stage of compassion, where your compassion is simply the wish to see other sentient beings free from suffering. It is not complemented by any, it is not reinforced by any particular insight into the nature of suffering, nor the nature of that sentient being. And there is the second level of development of compassion, where your compassion towards other sentient beings is not simply a wish to see that sentient being free from suffering, but also it is reinforced by such insights into the impermanent nature, the transient nature of the existence. So since we define compassion as that wish, that emotion that wishes to see the other being free of suffering, so what is required is the ability to feel connected to that being. We also see that the more we feel close towards a particular person or animal or whatever it is, the greater our capacity to empathize with that being. And therefore, one of the elements in the spiritual practice of developing compassion and cultivating compassion is to try to develop this ability to feel empathetic, this ability to feel connected and sense of closeness to others. And in Buddhist literature, this is described as a sense of intimacy with the object of compassion. It is described as loving kindness, but it really refers to a sense of connectedness, sense of closeness, so that the greater the sense of closeness you feel towards the being, the greater the force of your sense of being unable to bear the sight of that individual suffering, because it is suffering that we wish others to be free of. Therefore, the other element of the practice of compassion is to develop some deeper understanding of the nature of suffering.
That 제시 방법로 두야 될래야 아니 당신 조건을 놓잖아요. 루루네마 전에다 루루가 명하체 아니 배 짠들어디 아니 쉬워져 나셔봐. 디 말이. 지글이야 아니 다 가서 주디. 명하지도 두메고는 놓잖아요. 직송제 심자들처럼 말을 다 맞소르 뒤에.
So as for techniques of cultivating the sense of closeness or intimacy towards others, which is a key element of the practice of compassion, we find in the traditional Buddhist literature two principal methods. One, although stemming from Nagarjuna, but more fully developed and presented by Shantideva in his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, is the technique known as exchanging and equalizing self with others. And the other technique is the technique known as the 7-point cause and effect method, where the principal emphasis is placed on trying to cultivate a thought and attitude that would allow you to, that would enable you to relate to all the other sentient beings as someone very dear to you.
당 안에서 로이 캐버래 리가셔래야 명아 주도 두메 하는 로 장나 야로 클쳐 야 리가셔 다심 조건으로 로 장나 로 클쳐 이나야다 남주디 냠도 세체 딘자로 다 송지전 민능 장나 야고요 스타한테디 로종 랑단 측제디 조 다심 조건으로 로 장야 디송기야래 레디네 되게 시그널이야 이네 마이 너도 상한다라 렘버쇼스 소양하고 디기다가다 심지타다로라 아니 맞다고 제신 평발을 보게다 따야기 간다다 마르시베 즉 통용도 봐 지전에다 간다 디니 숨지기도 하네 다 냠니 당야지 이 말이에요.
So depending upon the individual's mental disposition, inclinations and mentality and so on, it seems that for some the techniques presented within the method of 7-point cause and effect seem to be more effective. For some, the technique of exchanging and equalizing self with others seem to be more effective. However, within the Tibetan tradition, the custom really has been to try to engage in a practice where there is a combination of both these methods, both these traditions. In this text, 8 verses on training the mind, although the principal approach seemed to be that of exchanging and equalizing self with others, but we do find references to all other sentient beings as mother sentient beings.
다 명아주도 두메고 놀러 장인도 자네 아니 토마는 심녀버도 그래 당용 디 당용디 아니 지금 소소다 지 년이도 더불이야 착배 심기 로다 녀.
The first stage of that practice is to try to cultivate a sense of equanimity towards all sentient beings, an ability to relate to all others equally. And what is required here is to try to address the problems of having fluctuating thoughts and emotion towards other sentient beings. And here, not only should we try to overcome sort of extreme negative emotions like anger and hatred towards others, but also here in this particular spiritual practice, one should also try to address the attachment that one feels towards one's loved ones. Of course, in this sense of closeness that we feel towards our loved ones, there is an intimacy, there is an element of love and compassion, but often these affections and these emotions are really tinged with attachment. That kind of feeling towards that individual person is very susceptible to extreme emotions. When such a person does something that is beyond our expectations or against our expectations or contrary to our expectations, it has a much greater potential to hurt us. So in this context of this particular spiritual practice, we're also trying to level that out so that our sense of closeness towards others are genuine and they are not tinged with attachment or desire. The key point that we are trying to achieve in this practice of developing equanimity as a first stage is to try to overcome feelings of partiality and discrimination that we normally and naturally feel towards others. And also it seems to be true that attachment has a limiting effect on your vision. Attachment constrains your vision so that you are not able to see from the wider perspective. And this really seems to be true. Recently I was at a seminar on science and religion in Argentina, and one of the participant scientists, he's the mentor of a well-known neurobiologist called Francisco Varela. The scientist made a point that even for professional scientists, it is very important to adopt as a methodological principle that when they engage in their research, that they are not emotionally attached to their subject of inquiry, because